It's Mountain Monday, so you know what to do. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out. Now you notice the title of this video. I thought it was clever. It's a reference to that Avenue Q song, Everyone's a Little Bit Racist. But I went to Everyone's a Little Bit Fallacious. I'm talking, of course, today about that favorite internet pastime, calling out logical fallacies. And the thing, and I won't say my issue with it because this is the whole logical fallacy obsession on the internet is one of those instances of a good idea just taken to an extreme that makes it profoundly unhelpful. And the reason for this is people get obsessed with saying that, you know, an argument is fallacious for this, that, and the next reason, not recognizing that people, when they're just sort of going off the cuff and it's not a structured debate or prepared statements or things like that, everyone tends to use these, you know, logical fallacies because people are emotional creatures. And, you know, because we're emotional, we tend to slip into certain things that we want to justify emotions that we have. And often, how do I put this? Often in our society, I think emotions are not given enough credit. Now, before you freak out, because that's an emotion too, I think there's a big difference in saying that someone wants to feel heard, that they are feeling something, and, you know, this idea that I feel something, therefore it is fact. They're not the same thing at all. Like, it's one thing to say, like, look, this is an important issue to me, and I'm very close to this, and, you know, I am close to this because I am more directly affected by this particular situation than someone else discussing it might be. That's totally valid, and that's not just an emotional appeal. That's saying, like, look, I have an insider perspective on something that you have an outsider perspective on. Let's just make that clear. It doesn't mean that someone is automatically right and someone is automatically wrong. It can actually mean that both people are right because they're coming at it from different perspectives. And you know, the art of compromise is to find that point of commonality in the two viewpoints, not to show which viewpoint is right and which viewpoint is wrong, but to find those points of commonality. Now, the problem is in our media, increasingly social issues, you know, current events are dealt with through debate instead of an attempt at consensus. And technically, in lawmaking, consensus follows debate. Unfortunately, that's become less and less so. And so all we end up getting is these rounds and rounds and rounds of debate with all these statistics flying a mile a minute, and statistics can be manipulated, so there's a whole fact-check industry. Now, the thing is that a lot of people don't look up the fact checks, and the person who ends up winning the day is usually the person who makes the strongest emotional appeal. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that across the board, because that would be too much of a generalization and therefore a logical fallacy. But I do think that there are some issues where there are facts, and we do have to accept facts, and we can't just ignore facts because of emotion. Unfortunately, too often people do. And these are very smart people. And what I have found, and this is just my personal philosophical journey, is that the more someone tries to deny they have emotions, the more those emotions rule that person, the more emotional and less logical they actually are. And that sort of volcanic eruption of emotion often comes out as anger. You know, if you're, and this is, I've had debates about Aristotle on this point, because Aristotle speaks of mastery of emotions, and, you know, there's the whole Greek stoicism thing. My personal interpretation of Aristotle is not that that means suppressing of emotions. That doesn't mean don't feel them. Mastery of emotions doesn't mean avoidance of emotions. It means mastery of emotions, which means you feel things, but you don't let them control you. You ride that wave, you know, you guide your emotions, but you also allow your emotions to guide you to the best, most humane and most logical solution, because often humane solutions and logical solutions are the same solutions. And if we took this approach to a lot of social issues, all of a sudden the whole landscape becomes much less confusing, much less difficult. The thing is, there's no money in you know, sane, sober solutions, right? The money is in persistent culture war wedge issues that allow you to get donors for a political campaign or a Patreon for a video series. And I know I'm doing it wrong because I don't play that game. I am very much someone who's like, look, if you like my content, I'd really appreciate it if you kick in, you know, ideally $5 or $6 a month. So that's, you know, $70 a year, $5, $60 a year. But if you can only afford $1 a month, meaning $12 a year, I appreciate that too. More than zero is more than enough. And I wish I didn't even have to do that. I wish there was an advertiser-driven format that could be monetized successfully, but I've talked to, you know, YouTubers with 1 million subscriptions, and they even say that you can't make a go of it just based on standard advertising. You have to have a supplement that is more reliable. It has to be more consistent. And, you know, there are people that do very, very well on YouTube calling everyone stupid and railing against a particular cause. It's really easy for people to define you and sort of get easy traffic by railing against something you believe is a social disease. I actually talked about this in an article I did. I called it Tropes versus Deadpool, and how, you know, Deadpool hinges on tropes, most notably the trope of breaking the fourth wall. That is a trope. And the point I was trying to show is that tropes aren't inherently evil. Tropes can sometimes be used exceptionally effectively. But the trope in fiction is almost being treated like the logical fallacy in debates, right? But the thing I said, and this is one thing I've learned in my far too lengthy career in media. I've been doing this as an adult for 20 years. What do I mean by as an adult? People may not know. I was a child, like, theater performer. I was a competitive dancer. I did theater stuff like that. But that was, I consider, a training process. When I was 19, I went pro. So I stopped being competitive and I started going, no, this is my living now. This is what I do full time. And I turned pro at 19. If you stretch back, you know, how long I've been performing and creating content and doing choreography and writing, it goes back, you know, I was teaching at 14. I was doing my own choreography really young. So some people are just creators. I think it is something you are. And I've sort of had to straddle that analytics and creativity. And I think it's made me better at both. I think it absolutely has made me better at both, because Analysis and creativity are not the same thing. You have to know how to turn one thing off, or so that the other can thrive temporarily. And some would claim that saying, I think you probably should be a creative yourself to effectively critique other creatives. Some would claim that's an appeal to authority, and therefore a logic fallacy. I disagree. I think that, would you trust somebody to advise you on your car that doesn't know how to fix cars, right? Would you trust someone to advise you on computers who doesn't know anything about computers? No. Well, would you trust somebody to advise you on what consists of well-made entertainment if they haven't been part of successfully creating entertainment? And yet, the answer should be no, based on that little, rule of three I just set up there. But the reality is no. A lot of critics for media have never created anything themselves. If they've created content, it's been criticism of someone else's content. It hasn't been an actual, I'm going to make this just to entertain people. And I'm not excluding adapted works for that. That is a form of creativity. What, for instance, Peter Jackson's team did on The Lord of the Rings, that is creative. Like, yes, they took a pre-existing book, but they made it into a movie and adapted it in very subtle but important ways for modern audiences, so it could be a massive smash hit. That's making something. You know what is reasonable to expect from the creative process when you yourself have learned how to navigate the creative process. Because part of that is recognizing where you didn't navigate the creative process well. And so, you sort of realize that, yeah, I understand why this person did that, because it allowed them to get their thing made. And that's the big difference between creatives critiquing other creatives and people who are just lobbing spitballs from the sidelines. But I see a lot of this, dance monkey dance in terms of engaging with not just creative endeavors, but also people who are, trying to improve situations in the world for some group of people. People expect perfection from people just because they're well-meaning, and that's just not realistic. And I think the biggest sort of red flag in terms of all this stuff is the sheer amount of anger in the mix. Anger is a very important element of motivation in terms of both creativity and social change. Some of the best work I have ever done creatively and socially, is I just got pissed off enough to do something. I got pissed off enough to overcome my own self-doubt and overcome my idea that nobody's gonna give a damn, who the hell am I? Because, humility is the enemy of the creative, right? There's a certain amount of arrogance you have to think that anybody's gonna give a shit about what you want to say. And arrogance is treated as a bad thing by our culture, but you need it to put yourself out there. And, so some of the best things I've done is just because I got angry. But I didn't just have anger. I didn't spend the whole time cursing and swearing and telling people off and using ad hominem attacks and all that stuff. And so it turned out to be very good content because I had the fundamentals, and then I added an element of I'm mad as hell and not going to take it anymore. I wasn't being driven by I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing a lot of in these, the everyone's a little bit fallacious argument The funny thing is, this whole obsession with logical fallacies is a giant two-quoque argument, or two-coke, or however you pronounce it. Two-coke sounds weird. But the whole two-quoque, for people who are rolling eyes, it just means, you do it too. And I see this over and over and over again in culture war spheres, right? Everybody is trying to show the other side is this massive hypocrite. That's just a you do it too sort of thing. And it's become so self-defeating, right? You can't say you like anything in a video game anymore without somebody not shitting on it for themselves, but they shit on it anticipating someone else will shit on it. And I know I swore there, but it was with intent. It was for effect. Now, what do I mean by this? Example, okay? You guys know I love Far Cry Primal, and I'm, one of the few critics out there who is willing to say, I just thought it was a fun freaking game. We can dissect it and claim it's derivative and all you want. I had fun. I was cheering and squealing and laughing my butt off and petting animals and setting things on fire and doing that at the same time sometimes. Petting animals that are on fire. Awesome. That's why I play video games. Can't do that in the real world. And the Far Cry games are this wonderful experiment to me in being able to do a whole bunch of dumb shit without feeling guilty. Good. Awesome. That's its purpose. I like that. I had fun. And that's what matters to me. Like, we're talking about games, and games are supposed to be fun. So I could nitpick something to death, but that would not be good advice as far as I'm concerned in terms of advising consumers on where to purchase, because I had fun. But, one of the things I really enjoyed about Far Cry Primal, and this is just personal, I am not going to put a professional, weighted analysis of whether this is objectively good or objectively bad. I enjoyed this element. I enjoyed the fact that in Far Cry Primal, there were 3 female characters who were appropriately casted women of color, meaning I didn't feel like they were there to be the black woman in this game, or the Asian woman in this game, or the Indian woman in this game, either First Nations or East Indian. I felt like they were there because that's who they were, and that's what they wanted the design to look like, and they were well performed, but they weren't victims, right? They weren't, oh, here's this weepy person who's been harmed and we must save her. Be big man, be hero, to quote Pearls Before Swine. That comic strip where the crocodiles try to convince the zebra to jump in a wood chipper so they can eat him as hamburger by trying to say, be hero, someone fell in, go save them. And I said, none of these women were victims. I love that. They're hunters and they're leaders and they're they're cool. They're characters that manage to establish themselves exceptionally quickly with not a lot of screen time, but they still made an impact. I mean, their postures and the way they interact with the playable character, I thought was so strong. And then someone, immediately jumped in. 2 people, actually, almost immediately. Like, I tweeted this, and within a few minutes of the tweet, people who I know don't like Anita Sarkisian are quoting Anita Sarkisian at me. And I said to both of them, don't spread her gospel if you don't agree with it. And this is the problem, is people are so angry that they're perpetuating Sarkisian memes. Sarmemian, or whatever you want to make that into a meme of itself. They are promoting her theories through bitterness. And if you don't like her thoughts, if you think her thoughts are harmful, don't freaking repeat them when someone is coming at things from a different, more positive perspective. That's giving her influence. Because even though you don't agree with her, you echoed her. And this is the problem with gaming. It's not an appeal to authority. It's being terrified of authority. I have found, and this has been one constant within the gaming industry the entire time I've worked in it, is that there is this series of inferiority complexes within the gaming industry that we are just starting to begin to shake off. And I think that shaking off these inferiority complexes is part of the reason things are so loud and hostile right now. But the problem with these inferiority complexes is the fact that people tend, even though they don't like the biggest bully, they line up behind the biggest bully or cow to the biggest bully. And bullying is difficult to spot sometimes, especially when it's a woman doing the bullying, because then it's all alternate back channel, relational, alliance building type stuff. And we have a huge example of alternate aggression, secret keeping, alliance building going on in terms of this women in gaming issue, because the whole thing is turned into who has the biggest, loudest, scariest faction that you want to be a part of, so you're protected from the other big, loud, scary faction who is going to scream at you. So, you know, we have the secret keeping by way of block lists and private groups and these sort of whisper campaigns. We have the the alliance building of these networks and these safe spaces where, oh, look, 10,000 people are part of our network. We must be right because all these people agree with us. No, that doesn't mean you're right at all. It can just mean that everybody is sharing a common delusion. It means you're popular. It doesn't mean you're right. Does my 10,000 plus YouTube subscribers or my 1 million views plus on YouTube mean I'm right? No, it doesn't mean I'm right. It means I'm relatively popular. That's all it means, and it's not the same thing. And I'm not saying that networks are inherently bullying. I'm not saying that blocking someone is inherently an act of bullying. I'm saying the way it's being used here is a bullying tactic. It is. I'm telling you guys, as someone who has studied this for years and years and years in television, in music television, in youth programming, and now in video games, it is a form of bullying. And just because it's a form of bullying that came up in a response to another form of bullying doesn't make it right. It's not solving the problem, it's escalating the problem. Now, how do we shake off this tendency of the gaming community, not individual gamers, but the gaming community, to cow to the biggest bully? Well, that comes from shaking off the inferiority complex, that games are somehow an inferior or more immature form of entertainment than, say, films or television or what have you. It's this idea that if something is fun, it is less intellectually sound. We have to shake this idea off. The strength in gaming, the power in gaming, is the idea that you can be fun and principled, or you can be fun and smart at the same time because they're games. And because when you gamify learning, you make the learning more powerful. They know when people's brains relax, when people are having fun, their brains relax and they take in more data and it holds more because of the way the brain forms connections. If something makes you feel happy, the brain sees this as something that's more important to your continued existence on this planet. This is good. You know, the reason we have, the lizard brain going, that good, or that bad, is to keep us breathing and moving around any way we can. I don't want to say walking around because that's ableist. Kidding. But we need to get over this idea that just because something's fun means it's less worthy as an intellectual endeavor. And this is the first step to shaking off this inferiority complex that games have as a form of entertainment. I've said it before, I will say it again. Gaming is the strongest, most complicated, most difficult, most powerful entertainment medium in the world right now, precisely because it is interactive and empowers the player to make their own choices, not just in what they think about the content, not just what they, how do I say this? Not just in the outcomes in terms of alternative endings or scores or whatever, but also inherently in what the content is intended to mean. Player intent in terms of meaning, player agency is something we don't get in films. We don't talk about freaking audience agency in film and TV. The audience has no agency. The audience is a passive observer. Especially in TV, you turn it on, the only agency you have is deciding whether to hook up your cable or subscribe to that channel or go see that movie. The minute you sit down in that chair, you are not an agent in the action, you are an observer. In games, that's different. And it is so different in sitting down and watching something going, oh, what does this say that all these other people did this? And sitting down in front of a game, playing it for hours and hours and hours and contemplating, what am I going to do? How am I going to impact this world? What does it mean that I did this? That is crazy powerful. That is not a lecture. That is an experience. And why the hell should games keep trying to be movies? Money. Well, we don't need that anymore. Gaming, games make as much money, if not more money, than movies do now. It's a huge business. And it's a business not controlled by one, I won't say country, but one culture, one sort of combination of corporation and nationalism. Gaming's a global phenomenon. You can make a successful game in Poland just as easily as you can make a successful game in Canada or America or India or China, or it is global. You don't have to be in New York, Chicago, LA to make a successful video game. That's also amazing, and that is something we should be damn proud of. And we don't fly the flag enough in terms of we don't have American exceptionalism in video games the way Hollywood has it. The fact that it's called Hollywood, that's a geographic place, right? We can say film and television, fine, but with the exception of either a Hong Kong cinema or Bollywood, the Western media, those are both Eastern phenomenons, Western media is controlled by Hollywood. And Hollywood is a philosophical entity as much as a geographic location. It's a part of a story. If a film office is in New York, it's still connected to Hollywood. But you know what I mean. And we have this fallacy, hence the, everyone's a little bit fallacious. That's the thing about this video. We have this fallacy that gaming needs to grow up. And my argument, my counter-argument, is that gaming never needed to grow up. This is a sort of, the Grinch stole Christmas thing. You can't stop Christmas from coming. It's that sort of thing with gaming. You can't stop the human desire to want to have fun. You can't take it away or control it by telling people that fun is a less noble state. And more and more the Oscars are pushing into more big budget things, which I find kind of interesting because every year I get older and every year I get more involved in gaming, the less I care about Oscars because I see fewer and fewer of the Oscar nominated movies every year. But that's sort of a digression. Getting back to this idea that gaming's for kids, what more important type of media in the world is there but the media our children are interacting with? Why do we downplay something because it's for kids? Why do we apply something as less nuanced because it's for 14-year-old girls or it's for boys? Why do we downplay the significance of media content for youth, considering that media is going to shape the opinions of impressionable minds? That's the most important media in the world, as far as I'm concerned. That's why I got into youth programming. That's why that became sort of my specialty. And unfortunately, I learned the hard way that when you're making youth programming, you're actually making 18 to 24-year-old male programming just because of where the advertising dollars are. But because the big money campaigns aren't in stuff for teenage girls. It's just, I know it seems strange, but that's the reality of advertising. They don't invest as heavily in that sort of thing. But we need to get over this fallacy. We need to stop this, all of us collectively being fallacious. That gaming as a whole needs to improve morally. It is not so. We need to diversify the type of products we have just to stay market competitive. We need to continue to create, interesting products because people get bored. People don't want the same thing over and over and over again. Every industry needs to innovate. But we don't need to improve morally. We have to become more secure. Because when we become more secure, we will be better at sharing. We will be less reactive to outsiders. We will be less scared of letting new people in. That's what we do. The idea that gaming needs to grow up is just a lie. There's nothing more mature than the understanding that people need fun. That's a mature, grown-up decision that you can't live by toil alone. What we need to do is have more confidence, not more maturity. And some people could say, confidence and maturity are linked. Yes, they are, but the kind of maturity that people are advocating is the boring-ass kind that's actually ridiculously insecure. Because that kind of maturity says you can't act like a goof because that's not adult. I'm sorry, that's an insecure person. I want nothing to do with that. Being a true adult is making sure you still have room in your life for fun. And that's the importance of games. That's the lesson gaming teaches, and that's something everybody, I think, needs more of. Because when you have fun, your mind opens up, your thoughts become more free, and you become less easily controlled. In unstructured environments, you have to think for yourself. You become a more abstract, more independent thinker. And that's good. That's going to increase innovation. It's going to increase progress. It's going to allow people to develop those new big ideas. And so that's the fallacy I want to tackle today. That's the, I came in as sort of fun because everyone's a little bit fallacious. And I think that the people who keep going, well, that's this or that's that online, that's an argument, that's an appeal to authority, that's a this, that's a that. Stop nitpicking at other people and start looking at your own issues, because the minute you start, this is so weird, the minute you start with those logical fallacies thing, you're trying to set yourself up as a logical authority. So it's bizarre, and this is the problem with having these discussions, is that it's important to recognize these things, and yeah, it's important to do this rhetoric, this rhetorical stuff. But you have to know what you're going to talk about. You have to know where you're going to apply this rhetoric. Something has to mean enough to you that you go beyond the analysis of how something is being said and actually look at what's being said, right? And that's really what these emphasis on logical fallacies is designed to accomplish. Are you saying something that really has substance? Or are you sending someone through a hedge maze of words? Are you just spewing multisyllabic word confetti and hoping no one notices, right? So that's the message I kind of had to convey today. Today's sort of Zen is more of a rah, pep talk, rah, we're awesome, because that's its form of Zen. To me, Zen comes from fun, and that's why Mountain Mondays came from Far Cry games. But I shall close there. I think I've said enough, given people enough to think about. So we'll close off. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out.